All right. Talk about skepticism today. Let's let some people in. All right. Hi, everyone.
Happy Thursday.
Yeah, and then the second last class already. Pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, it's super crazy.
Uh-huh.
How's your throat today?
A little better, but the nose is still a little congested. It's weird. It takes you a while. I tested negative like on Monday, but I'm still shaking some of the stuff. So it's a drag getting COVID. So let's share the screen here. That way everybody can see the reading.
All I got was reading. It was a drag and then reading. You kind of froze up for a bit.
Oh yeah, we're just sharing the screen. I'm just kind of talking to myself.
That's cool. All right.
There we
That
go.
happened.
Right. So let's get started. So for today, I thought it would be great to discuss skepticism because I get the sense that I have a fairly diverse group of students in terms of who's a philosopher and who's a non-philosopher, right? I've got some students who have probably encountered skepticism before in a philosophy course, but we've probably got some students who have not, but who nonetheless have heard about skepticism and perhaps have heard about some of the major figures like Pyrrho of Elis or Rene Descartes, who we're going to talk about today. So I'll just kick the can to all of the students here. Who's let's hear what you know about skepticism, whether it is just, oh, I've heard of that, or oh, I know about skepticism, blah 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 blah. Let's hear from everybody.
I've heard of that.
That's it. Just kind of like, I've heard the word skepticism and I know what it means, kind of thing.
I just heard it. Yeah. No. Skepticism could imply just a critical assessment of things, keeping an open mind towards things, and never taking things at face value.
Sorry, what was the last one?
Never taking things at face value.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Anyone else?
No, everything pretty much is what JF said. I do tend to hear the word skepticism, especially in this realm when we're talking about things like paranormal phenomena. Usually you hear the word skepticism in that regard, but it's not usually something that I don't think you just talk about maybe in everyday conversation about, well, unless you do, because you can be skeptics about a lot of different things, right? It's not just phenomena.
Like if I said I'm skeptical about the government's climate change plans, I'm skeptical about the chances of success, right? Like on their plans to mitigate climate change. What would that mean? Well, that would mean like I doubt that their plan will work, perhaps something like that, right? So, and that's the thing. Skepticism comes from this word. This is not. This is just a transliteration. Skepsis in ancient Greek means doubt, right? And the very first skeptic, or the first that the guy that we give the credit to, is a guy named Pyrrho of Elis. So that's this guy. Type it out here. And he was a 4th century philosopher. 4th century BCE, I should say. Interesting fellow. It is said that he was very well traveled. He went to India, for example, and studied with the Gymnosophists. Who knows about the Gymnosophists? Let's do some etymology and see if we can figure out who they are. Well, first of all, philosophy, Sophia, right? Sophia is an ancient Greek word that means wisdom. So, you know, philosophia is love of wisdom. Philosophos, you know, philosophoi, philosophers. So Sophia means wisdom. So we have the Gymnosophist. Gymnos is related to the word, or rather our word, gymnasium, comes from the word gymnos or gymnos. We actually don't know how it would have been pronounced. So this word gymnos or gymnos means nudity. So gymnasium. The ancient Greeks worked out in the nude. They did all their athletics in the nude, and they'd grease themselves up with like some olive oil or something and wrestle, right? So the Gymnosophists are, anyone want to guess?
Naked philosophers.
The naked wise men, yes.
Okay.
They were the yogis in India. The people who were meditating, doing philosophy, because yoga isn't just exercise, right? Yoga is a whole philosophy over there at this time. So he studied with the Gymnosophists, the yogis in the Hindu tradition. He studied with Buddhists, learned from them, went back to Greece, and is credited with founding the school of philosophy known as Skepticism, to doubt. In skepticism, we doubt. Yes, we doubt in the sense that we try and, at least when it comes to questions that can be answered, things that are evident, that there is evidence for, or there could be evidence for that there's not. We doubt those things to try and have certainty. Of the things that we can't do this with, we just suspend our judgment. So doubt is skepsis. The suspension of judgment is called epoche, which is kind of spelt like epoch. So this is all, by the way, for happiness, for what the Greeks called eudaimonia. Which means like flourishing, to be the best that you can be, the happiest, the most fulfilled. That's why you want to be a skeptic, because you might there might be things that you were going to worry about that you'll never know the answer to. So don't worry about those things. Do the gods exist? Don't worry about it. We can't know if the gods exist, if Zeus is out there. Maybe somebody made up Zeus, or maybe Zeus is real, but who cares, because he's Zeus and there's nothing you can do. If Zeus wants to come and give you the old thunderbolt, there's nothing you can do about that. So don't worry about it. Just suspend your judgment. And for the stuff you can sort out, well, try and get to the right answer. Try and doubt things that are that can be doubted. And you'll either reject those things, you'll discover that they're false, and then you can get rid of those, or you'll discover that they're true, and then you know something, and that's good. So skepticism nowadays is, very scientific. We doubt because we want to know. But for Pyrrho of Elis and his followers, we doubt because we want to have a good life. Right? The Greeks were all about the good life. How do we live a good life? And skepticism was one of the schools that arose, along with like Stoicism and other schools like that, that would teach you how to live a good life, a life of eudaimonia. Now, Pyrrho is one of those thinkers that we don't have a lot of material on. Most of what we know comes from, I think, Sextus Empiricus, so a later writer who's telling us about Pyrrho. And of course, during the Dark Ages, nobody was really reading this stuff in Europe. This stuff would have been among all of that stuff that was sort of preserved and expanded upon in the Middle East, you know, in the home of Islam. And then toward the, you know, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, that's when this stuff started to come back to Europe via Italy, because Italy was, you know, sort of important place of trade on the Mediterranean, or also in the Iberian Peninsula, where Spain and Portugal are, because those were part of the home of Islam. The Caliphate actually, at one point, extended to the Iberian Peninsula in Europe. So there would have been Muslim scholars there who had copies of all of this stuff, and eventually it started to make its way into the areas of Europe that were still Christian, and people started sharing knowledge, and all of a sudden people start reading the classics again in Europe. Of course, people had been reading them in the Middle East for a long time, but in Europe they were kind of like reintroduced, and that's what kicked off the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and eventually the Scientific Revolution. And Pyrrho is one of those thinkers. And one of the Europeans who read Pyrrho was René Descartes. René Descartes is, of course, a very important figure in Western philosophy. He is called the father of Western philosophy, actually. René Descartes wrote in 1639 here, he wrote a book called The Meditations on First Philosophy. And we're going to take a look at the first two today, where Descartes applies what's come to be known as methodological skepticism or methodological doubt. Where Pyrrho would have taught people to use skepsis and epoche so that they can be happy and have a good life and flourish, Descartes is doing this because he wants to be certain in his knowledge. Descartes kind of starting off scientific skepticism here. Descartes was a scientist. I mean, Descartes was a natural philosopher. We would call him a natural philosopher, and natural philosophy at this time just meant science, what we call science now. The word science hadn't been invented at this time. It was just natural philosophy. So Descartes did natural philosophy. He did mathematics. He was studied in law, and he was also educated as a Jesuit. So he was Catholic. He was educated as a sort of philosopher priest, but he never became a priest. Instead, he went to university and studied law. He spent a little bit of time in the army. Eventually, he would make his way from France to the Netherlands. And that's partly because of what he does in this book. He does some stuff here, like he's a skeptic, right? So he does some stuff like doubt the existence of God. And of course, back in 1639, you don't do that because the Inquisition's going to get you. And the Meditations was actually placed on the Catholic Church's index of forbidden books. And Descartes had to skedaddle. So he went to the Netherlands, where he was sort of free to work on stuff some more. And he eventually ended up as the tutor to Queen Christina of Sweden, ended up as her philosophy tutor. He didn't like this job, and they didn't like one another very well. Queen Christina wanted philosophy lessons very early in the morning. It was very cold, and just getting up in the wee hours of the morning, cold and damp castle, going to teach philosophy, and eventually it began to affect Descartes' health. And he died while he was in his 50s, while he was working as the philosophy tutor for the Queen. So that's a little bit about Descartes. In the meditations here, we're going to go through things and see how he applies this methodological doubt. So who's had a chance to read this? All right, excellent. It's not super crazy philosophy, is it? It's quite straightforward.
I liked how easy it was to read. I could not believe it was read or written by some guy in 16, not some guy, but written in 1800s.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
Well, that's because he's writing this for not just philosophers, but this was published in Latin, but he published an earlier version of it called The Discourses on the Method, which was published in French. So a lay audience could read it if they wanted to. So, and why the meditations? Well, he's literally meditating on this. He's like, I've been thinking about this stuff for a while, but I need to sit down and think through all this. So I'm just going to sit by the fire and have a think in the armchair. So, and he's writing it down as if he's sitting there, like pondering the nature of reality and himself and all of this, right? So he remarks here in the first paragraph, I was struck by how many false things I had believed. It's like, I believed all kinds of false things. How do I know what's true and what's not? That's why he's doing this. He wants foundations for his knowledge. What he's doing here is called epistemology, which means theory of knowledge.
So sorry, I'm getting distracted, but Shakespeare came right before this guy, and then Moliere came right after. So there's no excuse why he was writing the way he was.
Oh, you mean easily understandable?
No, not easily understand why Shakespeare was like writing in diatribes that were just completely out to like.
Oh yeah, well of course, yeah. This is not how it would have sounded. This has been, I guess we would say naturalized.
Oh, naturalized. Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So he's going to sit down and try and test his beliefs, see which ones are false and which are true. But he doesn't have to show all his beliefs are false, right? He just needs to do this. He just needs to find a little bit of reason for doubt. And he can do this by doubting the foundational things he believes. And then, like a house, everything will collapse. All his beliefs will collapse if he questions the foundations and finds something to doubt. So where does he start? The senses. Right? I've accepted everything that comes to my senses, but occasionally my senses deceive me, and you shouldn't trust anyone who's deceived you, even if they've only deceived you once. So I should doubt my senses. And he does. Descartes is a rationalist, which means knowledge comes from the intellect. That's the opposite of empiricism, where knowledge comes from the senses, not the intellect, at least primarily. And Descartes actually kind of kicks off this debate in philosophy. It was a debate that would rage on until Immanuel Kant came along. Where's the source of knowledge? What ultimately, what is the source of knowledge? Is it the senses or is it the intellect? you'll see here that Descartes is arguing that it's the intellect, not the senses. So, sometimes our senses deceive us. Maybe we shouldn't trust them. Well, maybe they deceive us about some things, but do my senses deceive me now? I sense that I'm sitting here by this fire, right? He's wearing his winter dressing gown. He's got his paper. He's writing, maybe some candles, some wine, should I doubt that? He says that I'm really sitting here by the fire. Yeah. Well, because, well, here's how he gets there. He gets into the dream argument. He's like, how could I doubt that these are my hands or this is my body? It'd be like a crazy person if I doubted those things. But hang on a second. Every night when I'm asleep, I'm a crazy person. My dreams are absurd and I don't notice, right? So, here he's talking about these people that think they're dressed in purple, but they're naked, or that they're pumpkins, or they're made of glass or something. But in my dreams, I'm often convinced of similar things, like I'm sitting by the fire in a dressing gown when in fact I'm undressed in bed. So, surely he can't be asleep, right? I mean, oh, well, if I was my dreams are always crazy. I wouldn't have a dream where I would think I was awake when I was actually asleep, sitting here being reasonable and meditating. Well, of course it could. He's had those dreams where he's been tricked by similar thoughts, like, oh, clearly I'm awake, when really he's asleep and dreaming. And he says even that there is no reliable way of distinguishing between being awake from being asleep. Well, I don't think that's true. We learned that in our dream lecture, but now he says, this is the dream argument, how do I know? Like, what can I be certain of? Are these my hands? Is this my body? Am I my body? Am I sitting here by the fire? No, I can't know that for certain. I could be dreaming and simply mistaken about being here by the fire, meditating on philosophy, when in fact I'm undressed and I'm sleeping in bed. And I'd have no way of knowing that. So Descartes can doubt his senses, right? Senses deceive us sometimes in the waking world, and when we're asleep, our senses absolutely deceive us. And the visions of sleep are like paintings. They're made up of parts, as are the fantastical creatures in paintings, for example, in real paintings. Sirens and satyrs are made of parts of different animals. My dreams must be like that too. My dreams are made of parts of different experiences, memories, imaginings. Maybe even myself could be imaginary. Like my body could be imaginary. What if my hands and my eyes and my head are all just different parts that have been put together? What if I'm just made up? The reason he raises this point is that, there are complicated things like bodies, but then there is just body, mass, extension, the shape of extended things in the world, material objects. Can we doubt those? Can we doubt these things? Yeah, absolutely. We can doubt any science that deals with things that have complex structures, because people could be mistaken about them, right? Physics, astronomy, medicine, all have parts that could be wrong. Therefore, the whole system can be doubted. But what about arithmetic or geometry or very fundamental things? Certainly those are indubitable, right? 2 + 2 always equals 4, right? No. And this is what gets Descartes into a little bit of trouble. He says here, I have for many years been sure that there is an all-powerful God who made me to be the sort of creature I am. Whoops, I went all the way back up there. I keep going past it there. How do I know that he hasn't brought it about that there is no earth, no sky, nothing that takes up space, no shape, no size, no place, while making sure that all these things appear to me to exist? Later on, well, you might say God would not let me be deceived like that because he is said to be supremely good. But I reply, if God's goodness would stop him from letting me be deceived all the time, you would expect it to stop him from allowing me to be deceived even occasionally. Yet clearly, sometimes I am deceived. So Descartes starting to get into a little bit of trouble here. He's like, well, God lets me be deceived sometimes. So what if he's not supremely good? Because a supremely good God wouldn't let me be deceived all the time, or even sometimes. And then the next paragraph, it gets even worse. Oh, geez, let us grant them for the purposes of argument that there is no God and theology is fiction. On their view, I am a product of fate or chance or a long chase of causes and effects. That got him into trouble. Even though he says for the purposes of argument, the Catholic Church was like, whoa, Descartes, you can't do that. You can't say that. We're going to have to ban this book, because you're a Catholic who's toying with stuff that goes against doctrine, and that's not good. That would be heresy. So where does he go to from here? Instead of God, he supposes that there's evil, this evil demon, this evil genius, it's sometimes called, who's set out to deceive him. God wouldn't do that. God's a source of truth. I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely dreams that the demon has contrived as traps for my judgment. I shall consider myself as having no hands or eyes or flesh or blood or senses, but as having falsely believed that I had all these things. I shall stubbornly persist in this train of thought, and even if I can't learn any truth, I shall at least do what I can, which is to be on my guard against accepting any falsehoods, so that the deceiver, however powerful and cunning he may be, will be unable to affect me in the slightest. This will be hard work, though, and a kind of laziness pulls me back into my old ways. Like a prisoner who dreams he is free and starts to suspect that it is merely a dream and wants to go on dreaming rather than waking up, so I am content to slide back into my old opinions. I fear being shaken out of them because I'm afraid that my peaceful sleep may be followed by hard labor when I awake, and that I shall have to struggle not in the light, but in the imprisoning darkness of the problems I have raised. So where's Descartes so far? He hasn't really built anything back up yet. He's still tearing everything down. It's kind of like he's left himself without his house, right? He's torn out the foundations of his house, to use his analogy. He couldn't just stop there. That would be bad. But let's take stock of where we are. So what kind of things can we doubt, and why can we doubt them?
So far, he's basically saying, yeah, we can only doubt our senses, we can doubt dreams, and being able to distinguish between dream and reality. So far, we can doubt I guess somewhat we can doubt God, but at least the demon, because he's trying to make us believe and be deceived in everything about things that aren't true.
Yeah, like Descartes not saying, hey, let's question the existence of God, everybody. But he is saying, like, you could, for argument's sake, you could even doubt that God exists or that God is supremely good. And absolutely, the dream that bit about dreams is actually called the dream argument. And it's all directed at doubting the senses. Because, of course, if I could be dreaming right now that I'm teaching a philosophy class, right? But if I think I'm awake and I'm in the real world, well, obviously I'm mistaken if I'm dreaming. Most importantly, we can even doubt, because of the evil genius, we can doubt even things like the truths of mathematics, even what we call a priori truths. Sure, you've heard this term, a priori. A priori is kind of like deductive knowledge. It's knowledge that you can know without experience. So if I ask you, what is the sum of the internal angles of this triangle? I don't have a triangle. Pretend I have a triangle. What are the sum of all of the angles?
90 degrees.
Well, it's a triangle.
3
Okay.
sides, 3 angles.
Yeah, so we have 3 angles. And if we unfold the triangle, yeah, Michaela got it. If we unfold the triangle, we get a straight line. So
Oh, wow.
0, 90, 180, 180 degrees. And then if I ask you, what about this triangle over here? The answer is yes, always. Always. Or to use the really overused example, like all bachelors are unmarried, right? That's just a priori knowledge. Like, Jones is a bachelor. Oh, is he married? No, I don't need to ask that. I know he's not because he's a bachelor, right? So those are a priori truths. We can know them without sense experience. We know them by logical deduction or something like that. That's opposed to a posteriori, which, as you may have guessed, is knowledge from experience. How many varieties of apples do they have at the grocery store? I can't deduce that. I have to go and check, or I have to call and ask somebody who knows, right?
But I mean, they're all pretty well displayed and separated, right?
But maybe right, but I have to go and see them, right? Maybe I could be like, well, last week the grocery store had red delicious apples. Therefore, this week they'll have red delicious apples. So I go to the store, certain in my knowledge that they'll have the apple I want. Lo and behold, they do not have any red delicious apples this week. They only have Granny Smith, for goodness sake. So that's a posteriori, right? Does this remind anybody of a movie? The whole exercise, the whole thing Descartes is doing, the kinds of questions he's asking. Does it remind anybody of any movies we've seen?
I'll bring up Inception. Why not? That's an easy one.
Yeah, because of the dream stuff, right? Andrea, yeah, that's the one I was looking for, The Matrix. Imagine a supremely cunning evil genius who could deceive you into thinking this and that. Ah,
Nice.
was that in Phil Hoyek's class? I know he does philosophy and sci-fi. Hi. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's great. Philosophy in high school. I wish I had that. Yeah, so The Matrix is a pretty philosophical film, and it touches on a lot of this, a lot of what Descartes is doing. How do you know the nature of reality, right? I mean, what Morpheus, right? What is real? How do you define real?
Yeah, the steak. When he's eating the steak, he's like, I know my brain's telling me that the steak is good, but I also know it's not real.
Yeah, when Cypher is making the deal with the agents to sell out Morpheus or whatever. And Yeah. Very Cartesian. So the machines in the Matrix would be a lot like Descartes' evil genius. And Neo is the philosopher. And Neo has to learn the truth. He's the one, right? Yeah. Whoa. So he has to learn the truth. And it's not just the meditations. Who's heard of Plato's cave?
Okay, I've heard of it. I'm trying to. Yeah, I've heard of it. But
So it's an allegory. Yeah. A hand went up. You want to tell us about the cave? Someone? Maybe not. I can tell about the cave, though, if no one wants to volunteer. The cave is an allegory by Plato that you can find in his book, The Republic. And it describes the philosopher's journey, right? Socrates is the character, and he's asking us to imagine a cave with people fettered, chained. And they have behind them a fire. And there's a sort of walkway thing with people carrying things. And the fire is casting these shadows from these people carrying things onto the wall of the cave. And the people in the cave think that that's reality. They think that the shadows on the wall are what is real. But one day a prisoner gets free and he realizes that it's not real. What he thought was real was, mere shadows, mere appearances. And then he makes his way out of the cave and he sees the sunlight, and eventually it hurts. But eventually his eyes adjust and he sees the world for the way it really is. But he still can't look directly at the sun, right? The sun is like the form of the good for Plato. So while you're alive, you'll never get there. But then Socrates says, okay, so the guy goes back into the cave and he's going to try and wake everyone up, right? But they think he's crazy. If you're crazy, man, this is real. Get out of here, Socrates. So, no, for real. Outside, the light of the good. It's wonderful. Shut up, Socrates, or we'll kill you. And eventually, that is what happened to the real Socrates.
You have to poison himself or something?
He was sentenced to die by drinking hemlock. Yes,
Yeah.
which hemlock causes a very nasty death. It causes an ascending paralysis. So first your legs stop working, and then your midsection, and you go numb. And eventually, once it gets to here, your lungs and heart just stop, and you just die. Yeah, Socrates was sentenced to die because he was found guilty by a jury of his peers of impiety and of corrupting the youth. So they would say Socrates is a sophist. He's corrupting the youth. All these youth are just driving their chariots and beating up their moms. It's all Socrates' fault. Of course, not really. And then impiety, people said that, hey, you teach the youth not to worship the city gods. And he says, no, I don't. But he was found guilty and sentenced to die. So, yeah. We got Socrates, we got Plato, we got Descartes. A lot of parallels here. A lot of parallels. Especially between this and The Matrix, too, as a film. Like between the cave, between Descartes' Meditations, the philosopher's journey, right? So that's cool. But Descartes' not satisfied. He's got to try and resolve these doubts that he's raised. He's found that he can doubt everything. But if he finds one thing that he cannot doubt, then he's good. Like Archimedes, he said that if he had one firm and immovable point, he could lift the world with a long enough lever. if Descartes finds one firm and immovable thing, one thing that he cannot doubt, then he's good to go. So everything could be fictitious. His memory is all false. His senses are not reliable. Everything's an illusion. What's left? Is there, let's try and make myself smaller. Isn't there something that he cannot doubt? Isn't there a God who gives me thoughts that I'm now having? But why do I think this, since I might myself be the author of these thoughts? But then doesn't it follow that I am at least something? This is very confusing because I have said that I have no senses and no body, and I am bound up with a body and with senses that one would think I can't exist without them. Now that I have convinced myself that there is nothing in the world, no sky, no earth, no minds, no bodies, does it follow that I don't exist either? No, it does not follow. For if I convinced myself of something, then I certainly existed. Here's where we find the foundation that Descartes is looking for. But there is a supremely powerful and cunning deceiver who deliberately deceives me all the time. Even then, if he is deceiving me, I undoubtedly exist. Let him deceive me all he can. He will never bring it about that I am nothing while I think I am something. So after thoroughly thinking the matter through, I conclude that this proposition, I exist, must be true whenever I assert it or think it. So this is known as the cogito. I'll type that out here. And it's short for this. And I don't know how everybody's Latin is, but who wants to take a guess at what that means? It's probably one of the most, go ahead.
I think therefore I am.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Probably the most famous line in all of philosophy, or at least the most popular line in all of philosophy. A lot of non-philosophers know this one, but they don't know what it means. What it means is that Descartes can doubt everything. And again, this is why what he does is called methodological doubt. He's systematically working through everything and applying skepticism, applying doubt. But can he doubt that he exists? No. Because even if he's being deceived about everything, even if the demon is deceiving him about the nature of the world or the nature of arithmetic or whatever, he can't be deceived unless he exists. So that's his foundation. I exist, or I think, therefore I am. But what is the I? The rest of this meditation gets a little dry, but he goes on to argue that whatever he is, he can't just be his body. He must be him. The I must be the soul, right? That's what he goes on to argue. And this is where you get his mind-body dualism. Remember, mind-body dualism or Cartesian dualism is due to René Descartes, who said that there is extended substance, res extensa, and thinking substance, res cogitans. Extended substance takes up space. It can be, changed. It can affect other bodies. So I can, hit a ball with another ball, like in billiards, and that's very easy to understand. But thinking substance is not extended. Thinking substance is immaterial. It's the immaterial soul. Before we get to more discussion, I want to get to the wax exercise, because this is how he establishes that he cannot be his body. So this is the wax exercise. This is another very famous part of the meditations. Let us consider the things that people ordinarily think they understand best of all, namely the bodies that we touch and see. I don't mean bodies in general, for our general thoughts are apt to be confused, but one particular body, this piece of wax, for example, and he's got himself a piece of beeswax. It's just been taken from the honeycomb. It still tastes of honey and has the scent of flowers from which the honey was gathered. Its color, shape, and size are plain to see. It is hard, cold, and can be handled easily. If you rap it with your knuckle, it makes a sound. In short, it has everything that seems to be needed for a body to be known perfectly clearly. But as I speak these words, I hold the wax near to the fire, and look, the taste and smell vanish. The color changes, the shape is lost, the size increases. The wax becomes liquid and hot. You can hardly touch it, and it no longer makes a sound when you strike it. But is it still the same wax? Of course it is. No one denies this. So what was it about the wax that I understood so clearly? Evidently, it was not any of the features the senses told me of, for all of them, brought to me through taste, smell, sight, touch, or hearing, have now altered. Yet it is still the same wax. So this is how we know about bodies, and how we know the bodies are different from the intellect. And also, the source of knowledge is the intellect. That's what he's saying here. If I was to rely on my senses during this wax exercise, I would be led to the mistaken conclusion that the wax is different after it's melted. It's not the same wax. But of course it is. We know it's the same wax. Therefore, knowledge comes from the intellect. Okay. I think it's a little both, personally speaking, but I get the point of the wax exercise. It is a good exercise. Same with people. When the wax is in front of us, we say that we see it, not that we judge it to be there from its color or shape. And this might make me think that knowledge of the wax comes from what the eye sees, rather than from the perception of the mind alone. But this is clearly wrong, as the following example shows. If I look out the window and see men crossing the square, as I have just done, I say that I see the men themselves, just as I say that I see the wax. Yet do I see any more than hats and coats that could conceal robots? I judge that they are men. It's the intellect, the mind that perceives, not the senses. That's why Descartes is a rationalist. So that's a little bit of Descartes' epistemology, and it's fun. It's fun. Descartes is fun. Well, alchemy 101 in this day and age, right? But he knows that the mind is better known than the body here. Oh, here's somebody. What does everybody think so far? I mean, we won't read past here. I just kind of want to talk about skepticism now. But what does everybody think of Descartes' position on knowledge and how we come by knowledge and how we acquire it?
Definitely was headed in the right direction. I mean, it's amazing that he came up with this in his time. I almost feel like there's a bit of fear. I mean, he was trained as a Jesuit as well. I'm sure a lot of people, free thinkers of that era, were, because of how heavy-handed religion was back then. So,
well, if you wanted to be educated, it was universities were all religious, and it was either that or you would go be a monk. You know, so yeah, that's true. But continue.
So I was just wondering, like, if his final conclusion was in due in part to that as well. Like, he didn't have the liberty to be like have completely free thought.
Probably not. No, like the discourses got him in trouble.
Okay.
And this was also banned. That's why he ended up in the Netherlands and then finally Sweden, because religious freedom was greater there. Yeah, Descartes' fun to read. Any other thoughts before I get to?
Yeah.
Oh, go.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Sorry for interrupting. No, it's okay. No, JF's right. I mean, especially with the sense where especially along the lines of the senses, like we were talking about it before, how our senses deceive us, and we can't even rely on what we see. It's talking about like what in cryptozoology we thought we would see, or some people say they claim to see Bigfoot even though they saw like a tree stump or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's right. Like our senses do deceive us quite a bit. So
But at the same
that was
time, he does
yeah.
go pretty crazy with everything, right? Like if you said to me, like, I saw a paranormal event and I said, nah, it's just an evil genius manipulating your brain, like, then that would be silly, right? Or a brain in a vat. You can see, I think now you can see the connection between Descartes' evil genius and Hilary Putnam's brain in a vat. Right? The evil genius is supremely powerful. He's like God if God was evil. And he can make you believe anything. He can make you believe that 2 + 2 = 5, or that triangles have 4 sides. And you just believe that, and it would make sense to you. Or if you were a brain in the vat, well, then you'd have a mad scientist who's, stimulating the right neurons in the right way to make you believe that you are sitting by the fire meditating, when actually you don't have a body. You're just a brain in a vat, being fed information to make you think that you're an embodied person. So,
which is why open brain surgery is so wild. When they shoot a diode into the different cortexes, and it's like guy's hand will shoot up and he'll start saying door, 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 door.
mm-hmm.
It's just wild. Yeah.
It reminds me a bit of what Jens talked about with epilepsy. Like, it exposes the mechanism of the body, which can be very weird, right? But a lot of this, of course, it has to be done this way, because many brain surgeries are directed at fixing something like epilepsy, or something that like affects you in your life when you're conscious. So to figure out where the problem is, you need to be conscious so that you can tell the doctor, oh, that's the spot. I smell the burnt toast, like in that Heritage Minute. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but yeah. Have you seen it? It's an old one.
I have not, no.
It's about Dr. Wilder Penfield, who was a neurologist who worked at McGill University in Montreal. And he cured people's seizures by removing the epigenetic bits of tissue in the brain. But to find it, he had to try and find, because many of these people would experience certain things before a seizure came on. And the commercial features a woman, every time she's about to have a seizure, she smells burnt toast. So he's going around in the brain, and it's like, oh, Dr. Penfield, I smell burnt toast. And so, okay, that's the part we need to take out. Very cool stuff.
I just watched it. It's like, yeah, it's a good reenactment too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of history there for you.
Was Heritage Moments also when they did the house hippos and stuff like that, and don't believe everything you see on TV?
That was not Heritage Minutes, but it was a similar thing. Yeah, the house hippo. I remember. Yeah, that was something about parents concerned about children's advertising or something. It was an advocacy group that was worried about the way ads would be directed at kids. But that one always stuck out to me because I was like, oh, I'm glad they have this, because yeah, I still know people to this day that believe anything they see on the TV or the internet. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
That must be wild.
Oh yeah. It was crazy. When I worked at Tim's, we had people oh yeah, Tim Hortons customers. Tim Hortons customers are interesting bunch. Most of them are cool, but some of them are weird. And some of them would come up to me, like at the time, there was a viral meme going around that the large and extra large cups were the same volume.
They have something like that going on right now with Starbucks cups.
Okay, yeah. It's false.
Okay, yeah.
Because people don't understand geometry. So the thing is about these Tim Hortons cups was this, these guys would fill the extra large cup or fill the large cup all the way to the brim, pour it in the extra large, and be like, oh, it's the same amount, it's a scam. Of course, he's squeezing the cup. And also, we don't fill the cups all the way to the brim. And because it's a graduated cylinder, even if you're missing a half an inch from the top, that's a substantial amount of liquid because it's graduated, right? Try this in a vessel at home. If you have a bowl, fill the bowl halfway up in volume, and it'll already be nearly to the top. And it's only that last inch or so that's the other half, right? So when this guy comes in and it says, oh, I'm just going to take a large because the extra large is the same size. And I said, sir, that's not true. I'll show you. Like, look, here's how we fill the cup. I'll do science. I was going to do some science. And he says, no, man, I've seen a video on the internet. I says to him in front of my boss, oh, yeah, they don't just let anybody put anything on the internet. And he left. So, yeah, Tim Hortons customers. Where was I? Doubting things.
Would that customer be considered a skeptic? No.
No, I would say not. Because a true skeptic, the purpose of skepticism isn't just to doubt for the sake of doubting. The purpose is to do what Descartes doing and doubt, same with Pyrrhonism, to doubt and see if the thing survives your doubt. If something survives being doubted, okay, then sure, you can believe that. That's what scientists do. Think about it. Scientists are always trying to falsify their hypotheses, right? And they fail. If they fail to do that, then we're on our way to knowledge. And that's really the importance of this stuff. Bringing it back to the paranormal, you'll see a lot of believers in the paranormal talk about skepticism with a certain kind of disdain, right? Like, I was watching more interviews with the celebrity psychic Tyler Henry after our last class. I was like, I can't let it go, darn it. So I'm watching and I'm trying to, is he cold reading? What's he doing? Like, I just can't let it go. I found a Vice News piece where they interviewed him, and they also interviewed a magician called Banachek, who's a very famous mentalist. Banachek is of course a skeptic because he's like, look, I do the same thing he's doing, but I don't pretend it's like supernatural. I'm doing the same thing though. And then Tyler Henry is like, oh, skeptics, like they just have bad energy or something, right? But it's like, that's not the point. And it really bothers me. Like, I think I'm personally more bothered by somebody who's like, oh, you're a skeptic, than somebody believing in something that I think is false. I'm like, believe whatever you want, but don't be all like, oh, you're a skeptic, because I want to be certain, right? Like, I want to be certain in my knowledge. I want the same thing Descartes wants. And the only way that I can think to do that is to doubt things and see if they survive that process. And if they do, then fine. I can assent to that proposition. But otherwise, like, I'm sorry, the default position should be to doubt. I mean, yeah. Like I said, I know people that believe anything. This guy's not a customer. He's a friend of mine who I worked with at Tim Hortons. I won't give you his name, but he's an interesting guy, where he just doesn't question anything. He just believes it, and it's terrible because he's gotten himself into like conspiracy websites and like rumble.com, the video site, where it's just all, it's like one of those sites like Truth Social. It's an alternative to traditional social media, but it's all just full of horrible people and conspiracy theorists. And he's watching this stuff and just believes it. Just, it's on a video. Wow, look at this. Did you know this? You know, in the early days of the pandemic, you'd be like, hey, Josh, did you know that the government's going to poison us all with the vaccines? And I'm like, what are you where'd you hear this? It was on the internet. And I'm like, man, you can't believe everything you hear on the internet. You need to doubt things, buddy. Like, so I don't know what his deal is. But yeah, he just believes anything he hears. Who's in the chat here? Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. You could tell him that and he'll be like, oh, really? Whoa, like, just believes anything. So it's crazy. Let's see, how are we doing for time? 3:35. We're doing okay. Any other thoughts on this, on say judgment, or Descartes' cogito? Anything at all? Any thoughts at all?
Are there any modern philosophers that would touch base more on this, or kind of to dive into this mode of thinking?
Well, technically, Descartes is a modern philosopher because this is the modern period.
Right.
But you mean contemporary, like right now?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, David Chalmers has just published a book recently about simulation theory, whether we're living in the simulation. Which, I mean, okay. But, you know, he's trying to reach an audience. He's trying to do something cool, right? He's trying to do some popular philosophy. So yeah, David Chalmers has a book on the simulation, which that's about the only thing I can think of that's kind of like this. Chalmers has some other stuff too. I think he's written a paper or a book or something on philosophy and the Matrix. So that might be fun if you want to check that out. But there aren't really. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Your opinion on Noam Chomsky? I guess he's more of a linguist. So, yeah.
Chomsky is a living legend.
Okay.
Chomsky is the only member of the cognitive revolution still alive. So when behaviorism, he was one of the principal figures that not only caused the downfall of behaviorism in psychology, but also it initiated the cognitive revolution, which is what gave us the cognitive sciences, which is what I do, right? It's what my PhD is in. And I'm not a linguist, and Chomsky is primarily a linguist. He's also a very famous political thinker as well. He also does political philosophy. I don't agree. Well, his views have changed a lot over the years. His version of universal grammar and stuff that he originally proposed, I don't quite agree with. But I think some version of what he says about language and the mind is true. Which, by the way, is that something about our language faculties are innate. Is innate. Descartes thought certain things were innate as well. Like we're born with them in the mind. For Descartes, it's God. Like belief in God is innate for Descartes. For Chomsky, the structures of human languages are innate. And this is how he spelled the downfall of behaviorism. Behaviorism said, of course, I mean, you guys are psychologists, right? So you probably know the story, but behaviorism was all about behavior. And I think it was Skinner who wrote a book called Verbal Behavior that tried to explain human language learning, language acquisition in terms of behaviorism. And Chomsky was like, come on, there's not enough time and there's not enough input for children to learn a language to be competent speakers as fast as they do, if they did it just by association and reinforcement. There must be some kind of innate mechanism that allows us to pick up language. And that was basically the birth of modern linguistics and cognitive science right there. So, anything else? I think we might take a little break.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's come back around 5 minutes to 4. And say so 15 minutes or so. And then we'll just chit chat a little bit about skepticism and the paranormal and stuff. Okay, see you guys soon. Start recording again. I don't want to forget that. And we'll share the screen. There's one other thing I wanted to raise, which we don't really get into in the first 2 meditations, but which does come up further on, which I think everybody who reads Descartes needs to be aware of. And it's something called the Cartesian circle. So I'll spell that in the chat. It's an example of a logical fallacy called begging the question. After Descartes shows that he exists, he needs to show that God exists and that God would not deceive him because God is good. So he's got to do something about that. In the 3rd meditation, he talks about how he can rely on his clear and distinct ideas. If he has an idea that's clear and distinct, like I cannot be doubted, or I can't doubt my existence, because even if I doubt, or even if I'm being deceived, there's somebody who's doubting or being deceived. So I must exist. So you can trust your clear and distinct ideas. Here, idea is a technical term, right? Idea means like something like a thought or a concept. Something that is perceived by the intellect alone is an idea. So he can trust his clear and distinct ideas. So how does he know that there is a God and that God would not deceive him? He has a clear and distinct idea of God. Very good. Okay. But then later he says, how is it that I'm able to trust my clear and distinct ideas? Well, God, being supremely good, would never deceive me. So God is like a guarantor of the accuracy and trustworthiness of his clear and distinct ideas. What's the problem? I mean, he's saying on the one hand,
Andreas says that's a circular argument.
Yeah. And that's why we call it the Cartesian circle. And it's an example of a logical fallacy called begging the question. The reason I bring this up is because I don't want to see anybody in their paper saying this begs the question, because no one uses that correctly. And I'm not just being pedantic here. We're doing philosophy, right? Begging the question is a logical fallacy. If something raises a question, then say that. Right? Like, this raises the question, do ghosts exist? Or is Bigfoot real? Or something like that, right? Begging the question is a circular argument where the thing that you're trying to establish, the conclusion you're trying to establish, features as a premise in the argument, such that you get a circle, right? So I know God exists. How? Well, I have clear and distinct ideas. Well, how can you trust your clear and distinct ideas? Well, God wouldn't deceive me. You know, it's kind of like when you meet those people on the street that hand out flyers about Jesus or something, right? You know, we've all met those folks. There's a lot of them in the Briarwood market for some reason lately.
There's a guy with the headset and a megaphone. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a guy and he has a microphone and he has like a big amplifier.
Yeah.
And he plays like Christian rock and just like ministers. And
if you don't follow God, you'll find yourself in hellfire. I remember he kept pointing at me. It's great.
Yeah. Oh man, I saw him hanging out with this other dude, and they were buddy, and they seem all buddy. I saw this, I got angry. There was another couple of folks waiting for the bus. There were two women. One of these women was trans. And so then the Christian, not the preacher, but his buddy went up to these women and started kind of like being not really cool to the trans person, and said some very off-color things to her. And I'm a philosopher sitting there, just I could feel the rage. I got upset. I was like, some freaking Christian. And this preacher guy is standing there letting it happen, letting his friend go and talk to this person the way that he's talking to her. And I was just like, ugh! It just, I don't know. It made me very upset. It made me mad. I wanted to go over there and, use my facts and logic on him. But there's no point. But yeah, there's a lot of these street preachers around in the market for some reason. But, they'll say things like, say I go up to the street preacher, and forget about maybe he's a possible bigot against queer people from the looks of things. Okay, that sucks. But also he's offering bad arguments for the things he believes. He might say, you got to read the Bible. You got to get right with God. Well, okay, but how do you know God exists? Well, the Bible is the word of God, of course. Okay. But how do you know it's trustworthy? Well, it's the word of God. Okay, but how do you know God exists? Well, it says in the Bible. And the Bible is the word of God. I'm not trying to be deliberately I'm not trying to pick on religion, but that is a circular argument. Right. And that's why arguments like this or appeals to authority, they're just not good enough in philosophy. Because why? We want to be what? We want to be certain. We want knowledge, right? There's something Democritus, an ancient Greek philosopher, said. He said, I'd rather know a single fact than be king of Persia. And that's another one of those old-timey philosophy quotes that I find really inspiring. So the circular arguments, begging the question, better watch out for those. But not everyone is immune to making those kinds of mistakes. Descartes also made that mistake. Descartes also, in the rest of the meditations, some of the things he introduces are the mind-body problem. If the mind is non-physical, non-extended immaterial substance, and the body is physical substance, which is extended and takes up space, how on earth do they interact? Descartes thought it was via the pineal gland, which is a gland in your brain. It's like right down in the middle of your brain that's part of your endocrine system. But Descartes thought that it was the spot that the soul connected to the body. We know that it's not. Again, it's part of the endocrine system. But Okay, so let's say there is a spot in the brain where the immaterial soul interacts with the body, and the body can affect the soul such that information from the senses can cause ideas, and the soul can affect the body by moving the body, controlling it like a robot, right? Even if there is a spot where that happens, Descartes still hasn't answered the question: how can an immaterial substance affect a material substance, or vice versa? That's the mind-body problem. And you'll probably notice that we've encountered it more than once in this class, right? Not in this form necessarily, but there's a different sort of mind-body problem when it comes to things like ghosts and spirits, right? Who are also supposed to be immaterial. How do they affect reality? How is it that people are even able to see them if they exist, if they're immaterial? Or how is it that ghosts would be able to, cause objects to fall, or windows to open and close, or affect the environment at all if they are non-material? That's another version of the mind-body problem, really. So if you see a ghost hunter with an EMF meter trying to detect electromagnetic waves from the ghost, tell them, hey, aren't ghosts supposed to be a non-material substance? How does your EMF meter pick them up? Doesn't make sense. So another thing Descartes does is he introduces the problem of other minds right here when he's looking across the street. How does he know that they are not robots or automatons? How does he know that they are men? Well, he judges that they're men over across the street. He makes a judgment. But before that, he was doubting everything. Doubting that other minds might even exist. They might not. And people accused him of solipsism. Solipsism. Who knows what solipsism means? Who knows what that word refers to? Solipsism. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Everything we know, everything we know already exists, or something like that? No.
Not quite. Solipsism means that the only thing that I can know is my mind and the contents of my mind. I can't know your mind. You might not even exist. Could be a brain in a vat, right? I could be being manipulated by the evil genius. I could be in the Matrix, and you're a computer program, right? That's solipsism. And that's what Descartes is kind of, he's not trying to do it, but he's kind of inadvertently being a solipsist. He's saying, I should doubt everything. I might not exist. This could all be a dream. I could be at the mercy of some kind of evil genius. And a lot of people said, hang on, Descartes, that's solipsism. You're saying that you're the only mind that exists. And that introduced the problem of other minds. How do we know that other minds exist? So that's an epistemological problem. How do I know that you guys are all other minds out there and not just computer simulation or shadows on the wall of the cave, right? Now that seems absurd. It seems absurd to ask that. And to a certain extent it is. But we don't ask it because we're really worried that, everybody but me might be a robot or something. No, we ask it because, again, we want to be certain in our knowledge. So I can ask whether you guys might be simulations.
Yes.
Yes. And I can ask that because I want to be certain in my knowledge. So if I doubt that you actually exist, and then I find that that doubt does not survive, well, now I can be more certain that there are other minds, right? It's an interesting question. How do we know that there are other minds out there? Could any one of you prove to me that you exist and I'm the one that might not exist? Tricky.
You want me to prove to you that you don't exist and we exist?
Yeah, can you do it?
Well, we could do things out. Oh man, I think therefore thanks, Jenna.
Yeah. Well, I think, but do you? And you say the same thing, but so I think too. So of course I exist, but then you could say, oh, you might just be a program in the Matrix or something, right?
That's what the schizoaffective types tell me in the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then again, remember, like, we're not meant to seriously, yeah, everyone else is an NPC. We're not meant to seriously entertain that as a possibility. We're meant to entertain it to make us aware of the limits of our knowledge. I mean, I think that I'll tell you, here's how Descartes solves the problem. You are able to declare your thoughts with language. And this is a faculty made possible by the rational soul. What Descartes would have called the rational soul, or what we now just think of as the mind. That's how I know that you're not just an automaton or a computer program or an illusion. You have thoughts. You're a mind. You have thoughts. And you can use language to tell me those thoughts.
We can share ideas. Yeah,
we can share ideas with language.
Right.
So Descartes says, like, look, even the even idiots, he says, like, even idiots and madmen can do this, you know, even if they're crazy, they can come up with a way to communicate their thoughts. Even if somebody's like deaf or mute, they can come up with a way of communicating, right? They can sign. But a parrot or a raven, a creature which can talk, cannot do this. It can't communicate its thoughts to others. An automaton cannot do this. An automaton is just acting from the dispositions of its organs, all its wheels and gears and all its little mechanisms. So a robot or an automaton or a computer program could never think, according to Descartes. But something with a soul or a mind can, and it can declare its thoughts to others using language. That's something that's how you know. So that's how I know you have a mind, because you're thinking and you're telling me your thoughts. You're showing me through language that you have reason, and reason is something that the rational soul has. Descartes, of course, says, well, the rational soul is given to you by God. Nowadays we say, well, you just have a mind, right? But that's how Descartes answers that question. That's how he solves the problem of other minds. Later thinkers would come along and say, like, what are you doing, Descartes? If like Julien Offray de la Mettrie, who's like the anti-Descartes, he comes along and says, oh, Descartes, you're full of it. Animals could, if they had the kinds of bodies we had, could absolutely declare their thoughts to others, you know? Just look at dogs. If a dog bites his master, then the dog looks guilty. The dog has a share of the moral law. Or apes. La Mettrie says, before anyone had ever done this, he says, look at apes. They have hands like us. They might be able to speak, but they don't have the right vocal cords. So you could teach an ape some signs, and you could talk to the ape. And people did do that eventually. They did do that. They taught chimpanzees and gorillas sign language and found that, like with Coco the gorilla, you could communicate with these creatures. So, you know, a lot of people subsequent to Descartes disagree with him. But still, those are the other things from Descartes I think it's important to know. So, what do we think of Descartes' methodological doubt? How does it apply to what we're doing here? And why is it important to be skeptical beyond just epistemic reasons when it comes to paranormal experiences or anomalistic experiences?
When you mean like beyond epistemic reasons, like beyond like the scientific foundation of like disproving things?
I mean, like beyond being certain in your knowledge, are there more pragmatic reasons to be skeptical of paranormal claims?
So you don't become a sucker?
Well, yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be uncharitable, but look at all of the in almost every area of the paranormal that we've investigated, we've found fraud, right? Psychical research, parapsychology, cryptozoology, aliens, astrology. In all of those things, we found either error or cases of fraud. You know, when it comes to this stuff, it's not just being secure in your knowledge. It's about not being taken advantage of. And maybe it doesn't matter so much. Like, you know, get back to Tyler Henry. I know I'm picking on poor Tyler Henry a lot. I don't mean
He deserves it.
Yeah. You know, the more I watch, because I was thinking about this, I was watching that interview, and you know, because I asked before, I was like, is he a con artist who knows he's a con artist, or does he really believe he's psychic? I thought maybe he really believes he's psychic. But the more I watch, the more I'm kind of like, nah, man, this guy's eyes, like his eyes are kind of like a crocodile or something, right? Like, you know when people smile, do you know what they actually smile with?
Their eyes.
Yeah, like smizing, right?
Right. Yeah. When you
Tyra
smile your eyes
Banks.
and drop your face. Yeah.
Yeah, she'd be all like, this is smizing. And I can't do it because I'm obviously not Tyra Banks.
I learned that from a
But
show. People Just Do Nothing. I don't know if you've seen that. No.
I love that show.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Corrupt FM.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
That's a fantastic show. I can't believe someone else has seen that.
It's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, so
Oh.
good. But yeah, you smile with your eyes. Like look, I'll smile. See? I'm like, oh, someone's heard of People Just Do That. See, you smile with your eyes. I apologize for the dark circles. It always looks like I have never slept ever in my life. But I actually do sleep. I think that's just the way I look. But what about like if a psychopath smiles at you?
Yeah, it's cold and dead. There's no, yeah.
They get this part right, but not this part. And there's a little bit of that when I'm watching Tyler. There's a little bit of like, oh, those skeptics, you know, like, I don't know, man. I don't trust him.
What's that? American Psycho. Who plays Christian Bale?
It's Christian Bale, right?
Yeah. And he does it perfectly, where he's like laughing and smiling, but his eyes just tell a whole different story. Like,
yeah,
in my room right now. Yeah.
So that's and oftentimes these are things that we can't consciously pick up on, right? Because psychopaths are actually quite charming. You know, we have this idea of a psychopath as like Hannibal Lecter or something. No.
He's pretty charming too, though.
Oh, he is, until he eats you.
Yeah.
You know. Don't be rude to him. He'll eat your liver with some fava beans. Hannibal Lecter is interesting, but most psychopaths are actually very charming. And you've probably met a few and had no idea, because they blend in. They wear a mask, right?
A really good book about that is actually Snakes in Suits.
Yeah,
fantastic.
That's by the guy that guy. I can't remember his name now, but he's the guy, the psychopath guy. He wrote the book on psychopaths, literally. And also Harvey Cleckley earlier wrote a book called The Mask of Sanity, right? So yeah,
It's a really good book.
What's that?
The Mask of Sanity. It's a good book.
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
So of course I'm not saying that Tyler Henry is a psychopath. So don't sue me if you're watching Tyler Henry. What I am saying is that if you look closely, you can see signs of deception. And yeah, the more I watch him, the more I'm like, he knows what he's doing. Also, according to his own words, before he became a medium, he was studying to be a hospice nurse.
Who didn't use Google?
Who didn't use Google, he claims, but a hospice nurse. Somebody who takes care of people who are dying. Because he wanted to help people. I don't know.
That's a good, like, crock of shit backstory. Sorry, I swore. I don't know.
I don't
Do I
care.
get, like, removed from the class now? Is that how it works?
I said bullshit in one class, so you can say it.
Okay, thank you. I'll take my mulligan.
Or you can say humbug. Yeah, I say humbug to Tyler Henry.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
I don't know. The more I watch, the more I don't believe him. I don't believe he doesn't know about celebrities. I don't believe he really wants to help people. I don't believe that he does not use a search engine. It's just, I'm sorry, extraordinary claims, right?
Our extraordinary evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just far more parsimonious for me to believe that this young guy probably does use the internet, and has some knowledge of popular culture and celebrities. It's just much more parsimonious. So, yeah, it's important to be skeptical, but we don't want to be like so skeptical that we just dismiss everything, right? I think that misses the point of what skepticism is actually about. And that's one of Sagan's whole points, right? Like, to find the truth, we need imagination and skepticism both. So you need a little of both. Your imagination needs to be sort of reined in by skepticism, I would say, because who knows? I mean, think of all of the things that we've figured out about the universe and about ourselves that just sound like, if you told them to somebody who didn't know any better, they would just say you're insane, right? Imagine I went back in time 100 years ago and I said, we will go to the moon in the 1960s or the 1970s. People would be like, he's a witch,
Yeah. Get in the sack.
Yeah.
What are those torture devices we were talking about?
The Iron Maiden. Yeah, put him in the Iron Maiden. Well, we'd probably have to go a little bit farther back, but that's exactly what happened with Giordano Bruno, right? Like, I think there are other worlds. Burn him, like, it's true. It's not an exaggeration. A lot of people were accused of witchcraft, mostly women, but some men. And the women who were accused of witchcraft were just probably like regular women that weren't even doing anything. They were just, like reading, doing stuff like that. Like, oh.
Is it like if she floats, she's a witch, and she drowns, she was innocent or something like that? I remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because if she floats, obviously she must be a witch. And if she floats up, you kill her. But if she drowns, she wasn't a witch, but it's okay because God loves you and will take you to heaven or something, I guess.
Just what you're talking about just reminds me of The Crucible a lot. If you ever read The Crucible, like the play, just accusing everybody of being like a witch.
I've seen the play, I think. I've seen the play, and also there's a movie, but it's true.
Okay.
You know, witch hunts. That's why we call them witch hunts. But yeah, Jenna, exactly. Like it's a lose-lose situation if you get accused of being a witch. You know, because they'll kill you if they think you're guilty, and they'll let you die if you're innocent. What else? There was something else I was going to throw in there. Yeah.
Crazy to think the Salem, I'm looking up the Crucible, Salem witch trials happened like the late 1600s. So, and it was in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's really nuts if you think about it, because a lot of the witch hunting that occurred before this was part of the Inquisition, which was much earlier, hundreds of years before this, right? And the Inquisition wasn't just about finding witches, but it was also about finding anybody who was just not Catholic enough or not following the rules, right? Like Galileo was, they didn't accuse him of being a witch, but they put him under house arrest because he said that there are worlds that don't orbit the Earth. You know, he showed them. Look at my telescope. You can see the moons of Jupiter orbiting Jupiter, not the Earth. And the Earth goes around the sun anyway. And they were like, oh, arrest him. So, you know, what do we do with our friends? Or what do we do? Maybe you have some esoteric beliefs. What do we do with those beliefs? How do we get people to be okay with being skeptical? In my experience, people don't want to be skeptical. Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Bring that back.
Well, I agree. Knowledge is power. Power in the sense that I can do more if I know more, right? I have more options available to me. That's what power is. Power isn't like I'm in charge. No, that's not what power is. Like I can do more things, right? Like if I have lots of knowledge and it's time to go to university and I'm a real smart guy with lots of knowledge, I have a lot to pick and choose from. Maybe I could study some science or some literature or be a computer programmer or whatever, right? If I have a lot of knowledge. But if I don't, maybe I'd still be slinging donuts and coffee at Tim Hortons, right? That's power. So it's like, what can you do? How many things can you do? So knowledge is certainly power. I agree.
I was having this talk about something similar with a friend yesterday about like some people like to go to a restaurant where there's maybe 2 or 3 items on the menu, and other people feel overwhelmed when they go to a restaurant that has maybe 40 or 50 options. They were of the class or the category that they would like to have the same options every time. They don't want to feel overwhelmed by the many options, but I feel like maybe it might be uncomfortable at first, but the more that you go or you look through this menu, yeah, it might take you a little bit longer to decide, but I mean, how can you ever go back to like a restaurant that only has a very select few number of items?
I got to admit, I'm on the fence about this kind of thing because I even if I go to a restaurant that has many items, I usually order the same kind of thing I would get at a restaurant with fewer items. You know, like, oh, this restaurant has this crazy dish I've never heard of, but I'm probably just going to get the hamburger, you know, like, because I know it. But
you asking for the pentagram?
Yeah. I need that one is called the Pazuzu. If you're ever there, it's good. So it has pepperoni baked into the burger, and then a nice sauce and cheese and jalapeno peppers. And Pazuzu is the demon from The Exorcist, if you're not familiar. So most of their burgers are named either after demons or metal bands, or like metal bands that are named after demons. So, you know, it's good. But
You're on the
Yeah.
fence about this.
Sorry.
You said you were on the fence about this because you usually take the
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, like because I certainly like what is familiar, and I like my routines, and but I also love learning new things and experiencing new things. But something that Jensch says way back in his paper on the psychology of the uncanny, where he discusses Masonianism, which is fear of the unknown or the unfamiliar, and really, you might turn around and say, but hang on, doesn't the paranormal represent something unknown and unfamiliar? Yes, it does, kind of. But if you experience something anomalous, and then you have an explanation for it, even if it's a paranormal explanation, it allows you to assimilate that experience into your worldview, into your life. It allows you to make sense of it. So it may not even be fair to say that people who believe in the paranormal are being irrational, because in a way they're not, right? Again, let's say I finally get to go to a haunted house and I spend the night there. Maybe it's like I have like a long lost uncle who died, one of those stories. I get his money if I spend a night in the murder house, and the murder house is haunted because of all the murders. So I'm sitting there in the house and I hear raps. I see curtains moving when the windows are shut, footsteps, things slamming. And I'm like, whoa, there's something here. There's some agency here doing that. And I feel like I'm being watched, maybe, right? Like I feel the hairs on my neck stand up. There's photographs and stuff where the eyes are following me, and I'm just super creeped out. And I'm like, all of these things are happening. The curtains are billowing. There's raps. There's these events are happening. And I'm terrified. How do I explain them? There must be something out there. There must be an agent in that environment. But I can't see that agent. But I feel weird, and it's doing all this scary stuff. It must be a ghost. It's really not. If you didn't know any better, like in the class, we've taken this class, we know better. But if you didn't know any better, that would probably be a perfectly reasonable explanation to you, that there is an agent out there in the world, right? And that's why I emphasized animacy and animism so strongly early on in the course, right? Because that's how our brains work. That's how that's how we let our brains work for millennia. Why we believe in gods and spirits and all that stuff. But now we've got a culture of knowledge, so that when you grow up, you've got this machine in your head that's like an animacy detector that's built for, ascribing causes to things in the world. The tree snapped in the forest. It's probably a predator. Better get out of there, even if it was just the wind, right? That's what our brain is evolved to do. And now we're sort of teaching our brains not to do that. We're using our animacy detection machine to reason.
Which is totally against evolutionary theory, because it's taking more energy to do so.
Yeah. We're actually using our brains for a job they weren't designed to do, which is why it's so easy to slip back into that animism. So it's not that it's been repressed or surmounted, as Freud said. Well, maybe you could argue that it is surmounted, but that's why it's easy to slip back into that sort of way of looking at the world, because that's what our brains evolved to do. And we've only been doing this kind of thing for what, a few hundred years? I mean, yeah, we had like Greek rationalism back in the day, didn't last. Arguably a kind of rationalism in the Middle East during the Dark Ages in Europe, didn't last. Similar things happened in India, China, Persia, and most recently in Europe. Will it last? I don't know. we could slip back into a dark age. There's nothing saying we can't, because we've done it before. There's no reason to assume it couldn't happen again. But the point is, we here in the 21st century have been living in the modern world. The modern world is not that old. And we're using our brains, our Pleistocene era brains that were evolved for hunter-gatherers to use, to hunt and gather and survive, in order to try and do things like, go to space and explain the mysteries of the universe. When you think about it, it's quite impressive that we've been able to do everything that we've been able to do with the brains that we have. But this can also explain why we so easily slip back into superstition when we're faced with something that we don't understand. That's what I think anyway. What does everybody think? Just any thoughts to do with anything relating to skepticism in the class? And just kind of spitball for the rest of the lecture.
Come on, Alexis, help me out.
Oh, sorry. Whenever I'm not like responding is because I am furiously mashing my keyboard to try to write down everything that was said. But just in general, it is important to be skeptical, because you're right. Like we can't just falsely be believing everything that we hear. Not even just falsely, like it's not very adaptable, I would say, to be able to just assimilate everything that we hear into our worldview, even if they're contradictory things. We can't just believe everything we hear, right? Like you can't go through your life doing that, because it can be quite dangerous. But other than that, I don't really know what else.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because another thing our brains are evolved for is to listen to authority.
Oh yeah.
Right. So when you say like you can't just believe everything you hear, back in the day, that was how we survived, right? Like your mom, I'm out there hunting and gathering maybe, right? And my mom's like, don't eat those red berries. Why not? Well, you'll die. Well, I'm not gonna eat them then,
Yeah.
And that's selected for, because the kids who are like, oh, I'm gonna eat those, they eat them, they die. They don't pass their genes on, right? So we are kind of set up to listen to authority. And to an extent, that's good, because we need social systems where, we got to have somebody in charge, but we still need to be skeptical, because we need the right people in charge, because we're not like back in the day when we lived in small family groups and the people who were in charge would just be the oldest parents, right? Like that's who the chiefs were back in the day. Your chieftain of your family group would be like your dad or your grandpa or your grandma or somebody, right? But now we do things differently. But we can still get bad, unjust leaders if we're not careful.
Like if you're thinking about even, of course, thinking about like Nazi Germany, but just in general, like we were talking about were we talking about the Milgram experiment before? Like how obedient people are to authority and how that.
I think that, that has come up. But yeah, you're right. Like, and look at what Milgram was able to do in that experiment, right? Like, just because he's got a lab coat and a clipboard. And of course, that was the defense of all of the Nazis when they were tried. A lot of them were tried at Nuremberg, but some were tried after because they had escaped and they were hunted down. Like Adolf Eichmann was hiding in Argentina, right? And the Mossad got him, and they brought him and they tried him in Jerusalem. And that's when Hannah Arendt, who was writing on that trial, wrote about the banality of evil. Like, look at this guy. He's not like, he's this pathetic little banal figure who was just following orders, he says. But it's true. I mean, imagine that. Imagine, I'm scared. Like I worry, like, and I had a friend in undergrad who was, he was a soldier, well, technically a paramedic, but he was in Afghanistan and he was injured there and came back and got a pension, so retired from the armed forces and went back to school to study university because it was free for him because he had served in the forces. And he said something in one class that we had on utopias and dystopias, when he said, like, I like to think that, now I'm a good person. Now, I went to Afghanistan. I didn't ever have to kill anyone. He never fired a shot that killed anyone. He was a paramedic. He was really glad of that, he would say. But then he also said, like, but I worry, like, if I had been born in Germany at that time at the right age, I probably would have been a Nazi, just because he would have been in the wrong place in the wrong time at the wrong age. And that's freaky to think about, right? Like, and it makes me think now, not so much here, but in the United States, it is a very polarized political climate. And I have to wonder, well, I don't wonder, I know, I'm very certain that it would not be as polarized if people just thought a little bit more and were a little bit more critical of things that they heard. And I don't know whether this kind of nonsense, whether paranormal stuff or pseudoscientific stuff is a gateway to that or not. I really don't know, but it sure doesn't help.
Yeah, skepticism, I mean, it's important in a lot of different facets of life. You can look at, like you said, the forces, but like policing, they're not skeptical about like the evidence being presented or the people that might be tried. That's a huge no-no.
Yeah.
You got to consider everything. Auditing, I mean, everyone loves an auditor, but they're supposed to have a questioning mind when it comes to like seeing the certifiable evidence. It was Carl Sagan that developed the skeptical movement or something, like he coined the term or something?
He was a pretty big figure, a leading figure in this, because at the time, in his heyday, there was a lot of stuff about ancient astronauts and pyramids and all that stuff. And he was one of the people that led the charge against that sort of superstition. And in his book, A Demon Haunted World, which I have over there somewhere, there's actually a passage in there which is eerie, is really eerie, when he describes a time when people do not understand science. The United States is no longer a manufacturing economy, but a service and an information economy that depends highly upon science and technology, and yet barely anyone understands how it works. And it's a recipe for disaster, because it invites some strong man with all the answers to come and try and save the day. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened.
What's that movie Idiocy with who directed that? Mike Judge, was it?
Idiocracy.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. I actually haven't seen it. I should see it. But yeah, everybody's dumb or something. Alexis?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Wait, no, this has absolutely nothing to do with what you're talking about. Like, it's completely unrelated. So continue with that first.
Oh, well, all I know about the movie is that everybody's dumb.
It's very simple. Yeah. So a guy comes back from the future or from the past, because everyone has like grown to be pretty ignorant of things. Like they wonder why their crops are failing because they're watering it with Gatorade. It's like, well, it's got electrolyte, stuff like that. And everyone's named after like fast food restaurants and what have you. Has anyone else seen it? No?
Oh man,
it's great.
I've really got to see it. Yeah.
It's Terry Crews. He I think he stars as the president of the United States in that movie.
Interesting.
And,
is he like smart president or not smart president?
No, well, he's the least stupid of the stupid.
Oh, okay.
Like comes in, it's great. It's great for a laugh too.
Yeah, that sounds funny. Yeah, and Terry Crews is funny anyway, so like I bet he does a good job with that character. Anyway, Alexis, what were you going to say?
I was just curious about what the rest of this kind of, I guess, semester would look like in the sense where the quiz that's coming out, if that's for this week or if that's for next week, that kind of stuff.
I'm not sure. Probably it would just be covering what we've covered up till now and maybe some cumulative stuff from earlier in the year. just to see what people remember. Oh yeah, yeah. Before we wrap up, does everybody want to go over the last quiz? I forgot some people were asking me about this on Discord as well.
Yes, please.
Okay, let's do that before we wrap up, because I think we all agree. Well, if you're in this class, you understand the importance of skepticism, right? I just thought it would be cool to kind of like show you how like where does the skepticism idea come from, right? And so today you've got some of that. We've talked about Pyrrho of Elis, who was like the original skeptic, and then the modern skeptic, which is of course Descartes. So I think we've learned enough about that today. Okay, let's see, where is it? It's on the module for week 5. I guess I can just do it like I did before and preview it and go through it that way. Or, yeah. What? Oh, quiz is over. But I should still be able to do something. Bypass restrictions. Aha, I can do that. I can go God mode. Okay. Let's go over the quiz. The constellations of the zodiac are those that appear in where? The twilight zone, the celestial sphere, the celestial equator, or the ecliptic. Well, it's not the twilight zone. I just made that up. Yeah, that's an old TV show. The celestial sphere, well, the celestial sphere contains the constellations of the zodiac, but it also contains all of the other constellations. The celestial equator would be a good guess, but it's not quite right. It's the ecliptic, because the ecliptic is the path around the celestial sphere that the sun traces through the year, such that the sun rises and sets, you know, around this ecliptic thingy. It rises and sets in one of your zodiac constellations. We know for certain that aliens have never visited Earth. Can I really say that's true? Right. We don't know that for certain. That's not evidence that they have, but that's true. We actually do not know for sure that they have not. It's because you can't really be certain about a negative in that way, right? Like if I said, prove aliens never visited Earth, well, how do I do that? I don't. It's not how it works. You're sitting in bed, unable to move. You're unsure if you're awake or dreaming. You are visited by a paranormal entity, like an alien life form, a demon, or a ghost. What's the most parsimonious explanation for such an experience? Are you having a false awakening? Have you finally lost your mind? Is it sleep paralysis? Or are you maybe having a lucid dream?
Can't be lucid dream because you unsure if you're awake or dreaming.
That's right. A false awakening, well, you haven't really, usually those are very mundane, right? Like, I'm awake, I'm getting ready for school, wash my face, brush my teeth, and then all of a sudden I wake up again. But there's no aliens or anything. You probably haven't lost it, although you might feel like you have. But yeah, sleep paralysis is the answer, because as we learned, sleep paralysis can explain in a parsimonious way alien abductions, the old hag phenomenon, all kinds of things like that. What's the name of that equation that we can use to estimate the possible number of alien civilizations? Is it the Sagan equation, the Drake equation, or the LGM, or little green men estimate?
To be honest, I was reading that LGM part. I'm like, I don't even know what LGM stands for. That's what it stands for, little green men equation, like estimate?
Yeah. The first pulsar we ever detected has this in its designation because it was thought that because the radio signals were fast and regular, that it might be a signal from little green men. So that was a little, that's actually an Easter egg, is what that is. But the answer is, of course, the Drake equation. It's Frank Drake from Cornell, who was a colleague of Sagan's, who came up with that. Some thinkers say that dreams are epiphenomena. What does that mean? Does that mean dreams don't play a causal role in our mental lives? That they are conscious experiences? That they are not conscious experiences? Or that they do play a causal role in our mental lives? Is it this one? Yep. Of course, I don't like this term. If they were epiphenomena, they shouldn't have effects. And all the thinkers who said they're epiphenomena say they have effects. But they aren't able to cause. Well, how do they have effects then? Okay, that doesn't make sense. Call it a spandrel, not an evolutionary epiphenomenon. Which of the following is a Barnum statement? You do not wear glasses. You like rap music. You have a great deal of untapped potential. You have brown hair.
It alludes to like non-specifics, right? Kind of like with horoscopes.
Yeah, general statements that could apply to anybody. Which of these is one of those?
The most ominous would definitely be the third one. See.
Yeah. Because these are all very straightforward. You do not wear glasses. Well, that's either true or it's not. I wear glasses. You like rap music. That's a very direct statement. Like, if I had said you love music of all kinds, that might be a Barnum statement. But if I say you like rap music, it's like, well, yes or no. Simple. But you have a great deal of untapped potential. Who wouldn't agree with that? Right?
A lot of younger adults didn't have that mindset, I find.
Maybe not, but you could have you could make a reverse version of it for like Gen Z or millennials that says like you feel as though life is hopeless and you'll never get ahead, and then people would agree, and that would still be a Barnum statement. So yeah, Barnum statements, you know. Great. If you were born on a planet thousands of light years from our solar system, the zodiacal signs on that planet would still be the same as those on Earth. And let's for everybody who's not sure, a light year is a lot. A light year is the distance it takes light to travel in 1 year. It's billions of kilometers. So thousands of light years, we're talking potentially on your way to the other side of the Milky Way galaxy, right? Would the zodiacal signs on that planet be the same as Earth? Of course not. Yeah, so that's false. This is like my one gripe. I really like that show Battlestar Galactica. It's a great show. Has anyone seen it?
Here and there.
So the premise is there's humans, right? But they live far away in space, a long time ago. They invent robots called the Cylons. Obviously, they rebel and kill all humans. And then, of course, this ragtag group of survivors has to find the way to the lost 13th tribe of humanity that lives on a planet called Earth. So, and it's the Battlestar Galactica is like the only capital ship, and guys, it's good. Like, it's good. So, but my one gripe with it is that they've got to find this map to get to Earth, and the map is the constellations of the zodiac. So it's like, Okay, so Earth is the place where you can stand in the sky and see all 13 of these constellations, or all 12 of these constellations. But I'm like, if you're already coming from thousands of light years away, thousands of years ago, then like you don't even know about those constants. They don't exist for you, you know? So I was like, okay, I guess I can let it go, but scientifically it's not very plausible. Otherwise, good show. Maybe I'm not being charitable because it's not really trying to be hard sci-fi. It's really more like a giant space myth. You know, it's kind of more like Star Wars in that way. So I don't know, but good show. Dreams always occur in REM sleep. True or false? That's right, false. Some dreams do occur in non-REM sleep, but they're different. They're thought-like, right? Those are the dreams we'll wake up from and, oh, I was just thinking of so-and-so, or my pants are transforming into some, you know, some word salad, like what happens to me. Betty and Barney Hill claimed to have been abducted by aliens. What is a potential problem with their account? Their memories were recovered under hypnosis. They were raging alcoholics. The Hills were prone to exaggeration. And the Hills never told anyone of their experience for years. So maybe their memories got a little mixed up.
Hung up 50-50 on the years and the hypnosis. I think I put hypnosis.
It was hypnosis.
Okay.
They didn't they did wait a little bit, but it was only, I think, a matter of months. And they told their therapist, we had this experience, and then he did some hypnotherapy. But the problem is, of course, that hypnosis can actually introduce false memories. So that's a problem.
It's suggestive. It's it's something like that. It's like suggestive reasoning or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hypnosis is all suggestion.
Yeah.
Like that's how it works, right? So if I'm like, remember this, then it's like, well, okay, and then, you know, your brain makes something up, right? These are just kind of red herrings. Like, you know, if someone's prone to exaggeration, then sure, their testimony may not be reliable. If somebody is an alcoholic or a drug addict or something, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. Right? I mean, what's an example? I'm sure, I can't think of one, but I'm sure there was some scientist who figured something brilliant out. Air dish. Have you ever heard of the air dish number? It's a number that you get based on how closely you work with this mathematician, Paul Erdős or something. It's pronounced, it's spelled E-R-D-O-S, Erdos, but it's pronounced like Erdős. Anyway, this guy was really into speed, and he was a brilliant mathematician. And the story goes that he made a bet with one of his colleagues. His colleague says, like, I bet you can't go without your amphetamines. And he said, fine, I'll do it. So he took the month off from amphetamines, and then at the end of the month he was like, there, see, I did it. I went without it for a whole month, but I didn't get any work done. You know, so you know, you can be good at your job if you have a substance problem. Doesn't mean you're wrong about things. Although I don't know, I suspect when it comes to math, amphetamines are probably a bit of a performance enhancing drug, right?
They're called study buddies, right?
Yeah, like,
yeah,
it would be different if you were, I mean, who's who? Like, an artist could take LSD and produce amazing art, but maybe if they took speed, they would produce terrible art. If you gave LSD to Paul Erdős, he would probably do absolutely terrible math, or who knows what he would do. But so I don't know. Which of the following thinkers denies dreams or conscious experiences? Is it Daniel Dennett, Owen Flanagan, Stephen LaBerge, or Alan Hobson? Well, Hobson thinks dreams are evolutionary epiphenomena, but we can still remember them. They're still experiences. LaBerge obviously thinks they're experiences. He did some of that experimental work to show that dreams happen in real time. Owen Flanagan, it's Dennett, remember? The instantaneous memory insertions.
The cassettes.
Yeah, the cassette theory, exactly. This is an easy one. Which of the following ancient civilizations would Eric von Daniken say did not acquire knowledge from ancient alien visitors? Is it the Greeks, the Egyptians, Babylonians, or the Mayans?
Babylonians.
Oh, no, not the No. They definitely got help.
Well, because he's written books on the Greeks and Egyptians, and I'm pretty sure the Mayans as well. Interesting. Oh, it must have been the Mayans. We talked about. Hold on, I'm going to look it up because I think there is a book about him with the Mayans.
Right. But he would say the Mayans got help from aliens.
Okay.
And probably the Babylonians. And probably the Egyptians. Well, he has said, yeah. He's like, hey, these guys had the Baghdad battery. These guys built pyramids. These guys also built pyramids. How'd they get that knowledge? Aliens. The Greeks, they're just smart.
The Odyssey of the Gods, the history of extraterrestrial contact in ancient Greece.
When was that written?
Where's that written?
When was that published?
1999.
So that's quite late.
Okay.
So it took him like 30 years to finally say that. Before that, this is why he got accusations of racism thrown at him, because he doesn't, in Chariots of the Gods, he doesn't say anything about the Greeks or the Romans. He just talks about non-Europeans. So that's why some people have kind of made that criticism that it's kind of biased, a little bit racist.
So the question's like related in relation to the Chariot of the Gods. Okay.
Yeah. Lots of mammals probably dream, but which of the following mammals probably doesn't dream? Is it dolphins, cats, dogs, or rats?
Dolphins, because half their brain shuts off.
Yeah. It's not that difficult to fake a UFO. You could even do it with some balloons and road flares. Yeah, we saw that. We saw people do exactly that in that video that I shared. Owing to changes in the axis tilt of the Earth, your zodiacal sign today is not the same, typo, zodiacal sign you'd have if your birthday was 2,000 years ago. How off are the zodiacal signs today compared to 2 millennia ago? 2 whole signs, half a sign, 1 whole sign, or 3 whole signs?
I don't know how you do half a sign. That'd be kind of weird.
The sun would rise between 2 constellations rather than in 1 constellation.
This is 1 whole sign.
It is 1 whole sign. The last question. Which of the following historical figures was instrumental in transforming astrology into astronomy, a natural science? Was it Kepler, Newton, Huygens, or Galileo?
Kepler.
That's that. All right, let's make sure. All right, how'd we do? See if I remember all my answers. This feels weird submitting a quiz to myself. Yeah, there are answers. Great. Anything else before we wrap up? I think we ought to wrap up. It's been a long discussion. Alexis, go ahead.
Well, actually, it's okay. I noticed, Jay, if you turn off your mic, do you want to go first? If it's like about the quiz too.
No.
Okay. I just had a quick question about, again, I was just looking through the Discord before class started. So I noticed just about people mentioning, because the essay is due 2 weeks from today, I think.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, this is just an idea because I've had other professors do it before in the past due to like unforeseen circumstances and such. Do you think it's possible then maybe if some people would like, if we're concerned about the essay being due in 2 weeks, if most of us probably haven't started because we're just waiting on the proposal, because it's worth such a large portion of our grade. Is it possible to like have the option of wanting to increase like the or change the weights of some of our different assessments?
Yeah, I think
Or
that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair because I got sick. It's taken me longer to get to this, and because of that, it's also taken because I wasn't able to get some stuff graded to coordinate with Jenna. Jenna also has been waiting for me, so I think that would be fair if I reweighted some stuff. I could make the proposal work worth more, or I could make the quizzes worth more and take some off the final if that works.
Okay.
I am willing to do that, and I can make that change and announce it over the weekend. But I can also say that I should have your grades back to you sometime over the weekend is what I'm aiming for. So I should have it done to you soon. But yeah, I think maybe in the interest of fairness, just because like I was like all ready to get started and then bam, like, oh man, you know, and plus a lot of students got sick too. I don't think I've had a class with so many students sick at the same time, like until this one. So other students are probably feeling pretty burnt out as well. So I think it's only fair. So yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, it was just an idea. I wasn't sure if that was like even a thing that happened, but like it happened before. But even so, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's my class. I can do what I want. So you know, I can make that happen if it makes everybody's lives easier. And it sounds like it will. So plus, you know, yeah, it's been a fun class. I think everybody just looking at the quizzes, everybody seems to be learning quite a bit. And from the proposals I've read so far, it looks like I'm going to have some really interesting essays to read, as is Jenna. So it's going to be pretty cool. Anything else? All right. Well, for the next class, I want to come back to something I mentioned in the previous class, which is the ethics of belief change and the ethics of belief. So we talked about skepticism today and the importance of doubt. Next time we'll talk about belief. And we're going to read a very famous paper by William James called The Will to Believe. And that is already available on Brightspace. You can find a link. Go ahead and read it. It is a classic paper. Very good paper. Everyone needs to read this paper, especially for the class, because we're going to do it seminar style. So that's it for today. And I'll see you all next time. All right. Bye for now.
Get better soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Stop.